Alright, in this lecture we're going to be talking about how to paint water. Now water can be one of the more difficult things to paint, but we're going to tackle in this lecture and go over it step by step so you have a complete understanding of how to cover painting this in your own painting. So we're actually on this one going to start completely from scratch. So I'm going to turn off all of these layers here. And we're just going to start with this cube as our reference so we know exactly where everything is. Then I'm going to take my selection tool, my lasso tool I mean, and we're just going to outline the shape of this box so we can make sure that we aren't going outside the lines. Okay? So there's our box, and now what we need is to get a nice, we're going to go with like a blue-green color. And, you know, if we need to change this later, we can, so don't sweat about that. And I'm going to start with a medium brush. And we're going to start in by sort of painting the outside edges of this, of the cube of water, and then we'll fill in the bottom half. So we're thinking of this, whoops, let's make sure we're on a new layer as well. We want to do that. So we're thinking of this as a cube, okay? So I'm going to start over here in the right corner, and we're going to have the water, ooh, that's a little bit too bright of a green as well. Let's bring it down some. Go start over here in the top right. Okay. And you want to think of these as peaks. Okay. Little peaks of water. I'm making the waves on this one a little bit bigger than in my example one, because it will take less time, it'll be easier to show you in more detail if it's not so big. Okay. Then we have this wall here. Alright, so those are roughly where our peaks are going to go. Now we can start to fill in the rest of this. This is just to give us a mental idea. These lines are actually going to get painted over, but we want to have an idea in our head of kind of where these go and where they sort of like line up. Okay, so fill that all in. And then we're going to fill in this up here too. Alright, so now that we've done that, we can go ahead and make sure that we're selecting this instead, so we're not painting outside the shape we've already created. And I'm going to bring this a little bit darker and just fill the whole thing in. Okay, then I'm going to bring my slider a little bit more blue and a little bit deeper, and I'm going to be using a soft airbrush, and we're just going to start to fill this in and begin to darken things out. Now the deeper water gets, the darker it appears, which is why we're doing this down here towards the bottom. We really want it to feel like it gets dark and has some depth in our little cube of ocean. Okay, and we're going to bring it even darker and do it again. Okay, and even darker, and get really right into the center of some of this stuff. Okay, and then you can go ahead and break it up a little bit, mix up the shapes. Okay, all right, perfect. Now, we're going to make a new layer. This layer is just going to be on normal, and we're going to get a nice light bluish gray color. We're going to bring our soft brush down really small, and we're actually going to lower the opacity to about 20 to 30%. Looks like I'm about 30, 25 to 30, okay? And we're going to come in here and start painting some reflections on these waves. Now for now, if you want, you can leave that cube layer on so you can see what you're doing, but you don't have to. But what you're going to do And make sure you have a real small brush for this. About, let's see, where do I have it at? Maybe 1.6 looks good, okay. You're gonna come in here and you're gonna start brushing in the markings or the reflections of the light on the waves. Okay, now you wanna keep in mind that these are curving with the shape of the water, all right? And you're trying to, I'm imagining this light is coming sort of from the left. Okay. And I'm just going back and forth. You want to make sure you overlap and sort of mix them up. Okay. And you're imagining where these peaks are in the water in order to get this effect. Okay. All right. Let's come over here to this one. Make sure you're breaking it up. You're not just doing one big smooth texture, because the top of the water isn't one big smooth texture unless it's like a really glassy sort of lake. But for the ocean, there's lots of little waves and ripples. So you really need to make sure that you have that broken up. Okay. All right. I'm just going to softly sort of outline where the edges of these go. Okay, now we can erase some of these lines out. Perfect. So now I'm also going to imagine that there's going to be some in here, and these points are going to kind of connect along these archways. Okay. So every time you have these 2 points, there's going to be sort of like a little bit of a crest connecting between them to connect those waves. Okay, and we're just going to go along and fill in each and every one of these in this layer. Okay. And then I'm going to have another wave right here. All right. So there we go. That's good for that layer. Next, we're going ahead and make a new layer. And this one, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to pick a different color. We're going to go with a warm color. And this is going to be kind of like a secondary light source to really help us define the waves. So this is going to be the light that's sort of on the back side here of each of these waves. Okay. So now we're painting the light from the other side. You can see how that different color just gives a little bit more feeling of form and sort of life to it. Okay. All right, and then this last peak over here. All right, there we go. So it's looking pretty good so far. Next, what we're gonna add, we're gonna make another new layer. We're gonna set this one to almost white, but instead a little bit more of a gray. We're gonna bring our opacity up to about 50%. And this is going to be where we start adding some sea foam, okay? So bring my brush size down a little bit more. I'm gonna start in this top right corner where the water is sort of spraying up, but we can go ahead and turn off the selection now. And let's make sure we're on a soft brush, okay? And I'm going to paint this, some foam coming off, right? And you want to think of these shapes as kind of like a chain link fence that's sort of squashed, right? But a lot more squiggly. And you're going to make these sort of chain link fence shapes and connect them as you go, making sure that it's not too smooth of lines. You want to keep them pretty rough, okay? You're not going to cover the entire surface, all right? This is going to be on where the water crests, where it's coming up with edges of different things, okay? So along the edges of the glass, where it's meeting up with the glass, it'll get some. The crests of each wave is where the most foam is going to be. You're not going to get a lot down in the dips of the waves, but you will at the crests. So when it gets up here, for example, at a top like this, you can add a little bit more at the top and then bring these shapes sort of down the wave there, with most of the water being right there at the tip or the crest of it. Okay. There we go. And then just right along the edges as well, where it's meeting up with that glass. Especially in those corners where it comes up against the glass, there's going to be a lot of breaking of the water there. And at this point, I'm going to turn off my cube layer. We don't need that anymore. You can keep it on if you'd like while you're doing this, just to kind of help guide you, but I'm going to go ahead and turn mine off. And you want to make sure you're trying to follow the shape and surface of the waves there. Okay. Can do a few little dots of water at the tips as well to show that it's kind of cresting there and breaking. Okay, and coming all along here. And this little edge where it's going to be meeting the glass. Okay. Go ahead and get these few waves here in the center. Okay. We're almost finished here, just getting a few last minute touches. All right. So there we go. That looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity on this whole layer just a little bit. Actually, yeah, we're going to do it just a little bit, and then we're going to do a new layer on top of this, and this is going to be really our brightest spots. We're going to go back in just a few points where we really want to push it brighter and just go over some areas. So back up here in the top right corner is where I'm starting, where it's really going to be bright with that big crash and a lot of sea foam there. Okay. Just maybe at the peaks of a couple of these. Going over what I already did and just brightening it up a little bit. Okay. Alright, that looks good. So now, I'm going to make a new layer. This one, we're going to go all the way white. We're going to use a medium brush because we want this to be a little bit crisper. And we're going to imagine the main light source coming in here now. And it's going to be, oh, we want this way smaller though. It's going to be coming in here and breaking off the water right here in the center. And this is really bright because this is the primary light source, and it's really hitting that reflective surface of the water. You want to make sure that as you paint this in, you're following the shape of the waves. Okay. Alright, then it will break up a little bit right there. Come in here. Get really bright on some of these surfaces. Okay. And then once we finish up this middle section, just go ahead . I'm going to put some over here on the right as well. And then a little bit on the left on this one. Okay. Now, we have that in there. I'm going to take my Gaussian blur tool and just soften this up ever so slightly so it's not quite so crisp. Okay. I'm going to take my eraser tool with a soft airbrush and knock back a few areas that I want to be quite not so bright. Okay. Just soften it up along the edges there. There we go. Perfect. Alright, that looks pretty good for the surface. Now let's just do a little bit more detail work down here in the bottom. Now that we've got this done, we can come down here to this layer we started on and color pick some different colors. I'm going to go with a soft brush. We'll leave the opacity a little lower. And you can come up here on some of the waves and darken up the insides of some of these. Okay. Just go across sparingly. We'll just want to break up some of these big shapes and add a little bit more texture in there. Okay. Want the water to feel like it has some depth, and maybe that there's a little bit of a few things floating in there. You can see me kind of just making these different shapes in the water. Okay. And then I'll continue to color pick and find spots that I want to either darken or lighten as we go. Okay. And then for a few points where the water gets really thin, if you want to bring it a little bit brighter, we can select this so we're not going outside the lines. Like for example, up here in the top right corner, it gets really bright. You can get a really bright green and really punch through with some light there. Get the tip of some of these that are really getting hit by the light. Okay. So there you have it. That's how you paint water. Typically you're not going to be doing it in this sort of a cube shape, but you will be using these same techniques if you're painting ocean water. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you guys in the next one.